Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. My name is Wade Brill, and I am your host, and I am so glad you are here. On today's solo episode, we are exploring this popular trend of how people are using AI, artificial intelligence, as their coach, as their manifestation buddy, as their self-discovery guide. So curious if you yourself have interacted with the different forms of AI out there and what your relationship to the process has been, how you've primed your artificial intelligent buddy with information, what prompts have you given it, and what's that been like for you? So I'm going to share some insights I've gained from people in my community, share my own perspective and research, but let's keep the conversation going. You can join me on Instagram at OneWade. You can send me a message linked in the show notes. So let's settle in and let's get centered. I'd like to start this episode with a reminder that nothing is black and white, meaning AI isn't all great and AI isn't all bad, right? There's pros and cons to everything, and technology, as much of a gift as it is in advancement to healthcare and education and efficiency and supporting people meeting some of their basic needs, it also has an effect, right? Everything has a cause and effect. And some of those effects are technology is making it really feasible for people to stay connected globally, which is beautiful, but that also has the inverse effect where we're more isolated in our little bubbles, where we might be relying more on digital connection instead of face-to-face connection, which has an impact on our social beings, how we regulate our nervous systems, how we feel a sense of security and that sense of belonging. Again, technology helps us spread information around the world and helps us gather information in lightning speed. And at the same time, it can have those inverse effects of oversaturating our minds, overloading our nervous systems, where we're processing photos of wars happening around the world in real time and seeing these images and getting this information at such an intensity where there's less boundaries. And so our brains and our nervous systems are trying to figure out, how do we process this information? And we can get very fatigued. There can just be, an influx in notifications, like all of these things that are creating these alarm bells in our environments. So we are not our ancestors who are walking in the woods, in the forest, nervous of lions and bears and tigers attacking us. We are getting these constant pings and dings of technology that are creating these alarm systems. So you get the point, right? There's always these pros and cons. And the same is true for AI. Like, it is this amazing resource that just shifted the trajectory of our world in so many ways that we don't even know yet. So when it comes to this idea of us relying on artificial intelligence as a form of mental health support or accountability buddy or self-discovery mirror, it has some amazing pros, like it makes having some sort of self-discovery mental health support accessible, more democratic. And then on the same hand, it does not replace humans. It does not replace working with a therapist or working one-on-one with a coach to really have specialized support. Can it do some really amazing things, like help spark creativity, help give us some insights, help give us some language, help reflect some things back to us? Yes, but that doesn't take the place of really doing this work of inner self-discovery or removing some of our blocks and barriers as a human being. So in doing some of this research with my community, some of the things that I discovered from people is some people are using it as a manifestation tool. So what I mean by that is, I know some people have used different forms of AI. For instance, Claude ChatGPT or Blackbox, and they have put in prompts something along the lines of, this is my ideal day. This is what I want to be creating in my life. These are things that are important to me. This is how I visualize my life. Getting as detailed as you can, right? Sharing as much information with AI as you can. And then it spits back out to you something to repeat. So maybe creating a little bit more flowery imagery, visualization language that then takes people's desires for their future life and it creates more of a poetic experience. Some people on TikTok or Instagram offering these prompts for people to use AI to put in their ideal day, and then for you yourself to record what AI has just created for you. And so you're recording then this visualization, and then it is up to you to listen to this visualization every day or, however often to reconnect and visualize this life that you want to be creating. I personally did this exercise myself. One of my girlfriends sent it to me, and I was like, okay, I'm curious to see how this goes. I did this a few months ago, and honestly, I wasn't very impressed. I was like, okay, this feels like a story time, feels a little generic because I feel like it's coming out of, a robot. It doesn't feel very spiritual or soulful, even though it's the information that I shared. And I recorded it and I have not listened to it. Now, I really believe in visualization. There's a lot of research out there around the power of visualization. You hear about athletes, Olympians, visualizing their course, visualizing their games before they go perform or while they're practicing as a form of training the brain and the neural pathways so that they can also feel it in their body. Also, there is a lot of research done by Dr. Doty from Stanford University. He's a neurosurgeon, a neuroscientist, and he really talks about manifestation and visualization and what is happening in our default networks in the brain when we are visualizing ourselves performing a task. So maybe it's visualizing writing that book or visualizing moving to a different country or visualizing your ideal career or your ideal day. It starts to embed that way of thinking and feeling within our neural networks. I'll link in the show notes some of the scientific research that's out there that supports this thinking so that you can dive deeper into it on your own if that interests you. Also, a quick plug here if you want to be doing some more visualization, especially when it comes to planting those seeds for 2025 and exploring what you want to create and how you want to feel and be in this new year, I welcome you to sign up for the intention setting party, and I'll link it in the show notes. This is my favorite workshop to do. It's virtual. You can join us from anywhere in the world. And it's a really powerful practice where we do a lot of meditation, journaling, reflecting, and planting these seeds so that it feels really authentic to what you're cultivating and creating in the new year. So join us, and I will link the registration in the show notes, and there's a discount code for a few more weeks. So take advantage. There's power in this practice. There's power in visualization. Yet I personally didn't feel very connected to what my AI was telling me. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I need to spend more time training it and talking to it. But why? Why do I want to do that? I personally don't feel motivated to do that. But if you're listening and you're like, well, I want to, I'm so curious to hear what motivates you to want to spend more time talking to a computer versus talking to a therapist, a friend, your own coach. When I asked other people that I knew did this version of repeating their ideal day to AI and hearing back what they shared, they felt really connected to it. They felt really seen. It helped them feel more excited because it actually felt possible. And I think that's a really big insight, that piece of possibility, because as humans, we can get so locked into assumptions and limiting beliefs like, this is my life, this is how things have to always be. I can't go apply to that job because that's way above my experience level, or I couldn't move countries because that's just impossible and that's so much logistics to figure out, right? We create these barriers for ourselves in our thinking. And so if somebody like AI or another coach or a friend challenges our thinking, it helps open up a door, maybe even just an inch, to think in possibility. And when we can start to think in possibility, that activates more of our growth mindset to start to see things in a different way. And once our brain opens in that sense, it's kind of like a moment, right? Where we feel more hopeful or excited or curious because things could look different. So, in that way, I think AI can be really amazing to just, again, show another slice of what's possible. I think it can get a little dangerous and tricky if we rely on it too much, especially if we're looking for it to diagnose us. I think as humans, especially in this day and age, we love to have labels. We love to have names for things. We love to have a diagnosis. It helps us feel a sense of control. It helps gives us information. It helps kind of our mind even orient to, okay, like now that I've been diagnosed with celiacs, or now that I've been diagnosed as being in a codependent relationship, or now that I have been diagnosed as dating a narcissist, whatever the term is, it feels like it normalizes. We can even think of this in the context of astrology, right? Like, oh, something's in retrograde. That's why this is happening, right? When we have some sort of label, it helps us feel a sense of ease. And I get it. And at the same time, I think we can rely so heavily on language and a diagnosis for some sense of normalcy instead of trusting ourselves. And this is a big thing because when I work with my driven, ambitious, mostly female clients, one of the biggest things that comes up with all of our work is this aspect of self-trust. A lot of the anxiety and stress that my clients face when making decisions, when trying to go after what they want, when dating, whatever it is, it comes back to self-trust. And learning how to build more self-trust is really at the center of a lot of our inner work. So when we outsource all of our analytics, so to say, I think we can lose, I think, and I'm saying I can, like, I think there's a sliver where it can go from helpful to unhelpful pretty fast, where we can lose our ability to have our own sense of data. And what I mean by that is, can we tell in ourselves that we had a good night's sleep, or do we need to rely on our Oura Ring for that? Again, we might collect really good information from our tracking devices that can start to then give us like, okay, well, Oura Ring told me I didn't have a good night's sleep last night. And let me think back. Did I? Oh, well, I guess maybe it was kind of light. Okay. And then we compare that insight to a week later where we get good insights that we had a deep sleep and we slept and we're at a 95% of readiness. And when we then analyze that data, we say, oh, that's what good sleep feels like. Okay, now I have that felt sense matched with the data, and now I can use that to gauge. I think that can be very helpful, right? That is where we're bringing both qualitative and quantitative research or insights together. When we rely so much on the data, like, oh, what does my phone say? How many steps have I walked today? Is that enough? Are we relying just on that versus listening to our bodies and listening to what actually our body's telling us? Does our body need to walk more? Does it need to walk less? Does it need more rest? those insights, I think, are more powerful than what all of our wearables are telling us. But if we rely 100% on just the data of these wearables and these external sources, we are losing our own intelligence. We are weakening our own human detectors, our own wisdom that's inside of us. And I think as technology has taken over our lives, as we've moved away from being humans that are in the earth and we're connected to nature on a daily basis in that natural rhythm and our animal instincts, as we're moving away from that, as we detrain our bodies and our nervous systems to be more in computer mindsets and be just these like heads on a stick, we are losing that human intelligence. And so we need to keep it because that is what makes us human. There's so much untapped, in my personal opinion, so much untapped insight that lives inside of our bodies and our intelligence of our cells that we are losing connection to. And part of the gifts of mindful movement, of having meditation practices, of taking time to walk and connect to nature, to be with animals, like those are all ways that help our nervous system feel more regulated and we are connected to the natural rhythm of life. Okay, so this is my big rant, but there's truth here of we have to be careful of how we use these resources, not because they're not helpful, they're extremely helpful. And can we keep our own intelligence alive so we're not outsourcing our complete thinking? I just shared my own personal insights around technology and how we can be interacting with them in a balanced way, in my personal opinion. And some research I did for this episode was really interesting to learn about. There was a church in Switzerland that partnered with a local university and created what they called an artificial intelligence powered Jesus, and they called it Dios in Machina. What they did was they had about 1,000 people over this 2-month experiment interact with this AI Jesus. And the data and full feedback is still being processed, but data that comes from 200 or more than 230 users suggests that 2/3 of them found the experience to be spiritual. Some people, like myself, had that experience of feeling like the responses were a bit trite, saying that they felt the wisdom shared was full of cliches. Now, they didn't keep this AI powered Jesus up for very long. They wanted it to be an experiment. They said that to have him permanently placed in a confessional booth wouldn't be very responsible. I'll link the full article from The Guardian in the show notes. You can check it out on your own. The field of artificial intelligence is going to change rapidly, and who knows where it will go. I think it's really powerful that people are using it for journal prompts, using it for reflection questions, using it to challenge your thinking, using it for creativity. Again, there are a lot of great ways we can engage in AI. I think something we have to remember is that we can gain this information. You can log on to ChatGPT at any moment throughout the day and ask it whatever you want. And you'll get that immediate response, whether you like it or not, right? You can keep asking it different things. You can keep challenging it, trying to get a more specific answer. And it's that sense of immediacy that I think fits into our daily life that feels really supportive. So if you're feeling lonely in this moment, you can go online and find some sort of connection or clarity. If you're wanting some inspiration, you can go online and type something in and hopefully get something out of it, right? There's that sense of immediate feedback. Whereas if you needed to schedule an appointment with your coach or your therapist, that might be something you have to wait for. And we don't like waiting in our culture. Our days are full. we want things when we want them and we want them how we want them. And so having platforms like this that we can mold and create with our own voices and insights is liking to our brains. One of the biggest things that AI powered self discovery experiences don't necessarily have, which I think we need to be conscious of, is even if they say kind words like, it's okay to feel stress sometimes, that's really human, even though there can be some empathetic language, the tonality isn't necessarily there because we're not getting it from a human being. Even though I know some people will say to their AI, give me advice back in the language that Jay Shetty would say, or, tell me something inspiring in the words of Oprah, that might prime the different language we hear. And that might be really helpful for some people. But I think we're still missing that human connection. Just like there's research that when you're a baby, and if you don't have a warm body to regulate against, it's going to mess up with your development. I personally think there's something, this is not scientifically proven, but I think if we're constantly tuning to artificial intelligence for feedback, for that sense of reassurance, for connection, it's going to leave a part of our human heartbeat out. And I don't know what that ripple effect yet is for humanity. For instance, think back before we had Google Maps, we were needing to have more brain space for our mental maps to visualize where we were going or print out directions ahead of time and kind of study the maps before we actually got in the car to go to the place or walked on the street to go to that restaurant. Now, because we can outsource that in our brain, we just click a few buttons, type a few things in, and we get that immediate information. And so we're not needing to have brain space for memorizing directions. The same for memorizing phone numbers. The same for memorizing information. How often are you hanging out with friends and somebody asks a question like, who is that actor in that movie? Or what is the most popular food in the world? You pick up your phone and you Google it and you find out the information immediately. And that is the world that we live in. We're no longer kind of relying on our inner resources and faculties because we can outsource everything at our fingertips. So this is where I get really cautious about outsourcing and using AI in these ways of being a thought partnership for us processing our emotions and our mindset. Again, helpful and also potentially harmful. One of the other conversations I hear out in the world of AI and how it's affecting how us humans work is, it's going to help with our productivity, but it's not going to replace our creativity. And creativity is something that we as humans still have our unique edge. And I want to really just pause there for a moment because creativity, as I've talked about with other guests on the podcast, and I'll link those creative episodes, it is a practice. It's something you have to work on. It is our own muscle, just like we all have our own mindfulness muscles we need to strengthen. We all have creative muscles to strengthen. But if we're constantly relying on something, for instance, we're reheating a frozen meal instead of making our own food and getting creative in the kitchen. We are spending time absorbing information, watching Netflix, scrolling our phones versus creating. Maybe that's creating music. Maybe that's doing some creative writing. That's doing something with our hands, painting, clay. So I welcome you to discern for yourself, like where do you notice you use AI to help spark your creativity, to help enliven something in you, as I mentioned earlier, to help challenge your thinking or open your mind into possibilities. And where are you using it as a crutch to undercut your creativity, to just get the task done, to just write that blog post for yourself? Side story here, my brother was using ChatGPT the other night when we were all together for Thanksgiving to come up with a creative story he could read to his kids at night. And think back to, I don't know if this resonates for you, but just babysitting or being auntie, putting kids to bed, reading a story or making up a story. You have to tap into some creative juices to think about characters and what they do and the adventure they go on and what is this kid going to enjoy. You have to engage creativity. And I get it. If you're a parent, you're exhausted at 8 p.m. when you're putting your kids to bed. It's maybe more entertaining for yourself to also read what ChatGPT creates after plugging in some information. Again, there's like pros and cons. Are you outsourcing your creativity in that moment? Yeah. Are your batteries really low and it's a way to maybe make the experience more fun? Sure. I also think it's still novel. So, of course, it feels more fun. And I don't know. This is just, I think, where one person gets to discern for themselves what feels like a wise decision. Does it feel wise to use ChatGPT to support the creativity process there? Does it feel like an outsourcing? Does it not even matter? You get to decide and discern. To summarize, have fun, be playful, be curious, use AI if it feels helpful, lose it if it doesn't. And I welcome you to challenge your thinking in two ways. One, still challenge yourself and think about where can I get human connection? Because we need that human connection. So try not to outsource your need for human connection with AI. And two, to really ask yourself, how can I use both, right? How can I let artificial intelligence help me, give me information, inspire my thinking, open up possibilities, offer me some potential new insights? And where can I still lean into my own wisdom? Where can I not lose my sense of discerning? Because I think, when we zoom out and look at this culture of fake news and spreading information and the internet and everything's just so out there and easily accessible, I think we've lost our individual abilities to challenge what we think is truth. And so we really need to maintain that critical lens by being curious, by doing our own research. So let's keep that alive within ourselves and not just assume because AI is telling us it's real. Ask ourselves, does that feel real? Does that resonate? Let our own qualitative data be really important here. I would love to now hear from you. What resonates with you from this podcast episode? Where do you have more questions? What's your stance on AI and self-discovery? Let's continue the conversation on Instagram at OneWade, or feel free to message me with the link in the show notes. Thank you for being here as always and letting me into your ears, your mind, your heart. It feels like such an honor and a privilege to share this platform with you. And until next time, stay centered.